I was again homeless at the age of 14. From the ages of 4 to 6, my family was actually in a shelter called Sojourner House in Boston, Massachusetts. At the age of 6, I actually moved to 57 Blue Hill Avenue, which is actually in the Dudley Street area of Boston. Now, the Dudley Street area of Boston is actually in the heart of Boston, and it encompasses portions of Roxbury and North Dorchester. Growing up in this community, because this community was devastated, it had 1,300 vacant lots, and the map actually shows all of the dark areas where there was actually a vacant lot. Now, the red star is actually where my home was, and the yellow star was actually where I went to elementary school. So for a number of years, I had to actually walk through images like this, where there were just streets of just abandoned trash and cars, and it was just completely trashed. Here's a little bit of more of the imagery of what Dudley Street looked like in the 90s. Again, significant blocks of our community was just left with vacant land. It was a part of the city of Boston where contractors would just dump their trash, and that there would used to be huge swaths of land that used to be just vacant. Here is an image that was usually the route of how I used to go to school. But this was how I grew up in my community. And the residents there were incredibly proud of where they lived, but they needed help. They needed to know that they didn't need to live in these types of conditions. Now, at the age of 7, I got a brand new bike and I was riding it through the community. And a number of kids wanted to actually steal my bike. So they started to chase me through the community. And one of the things that I remembered was a office space that was being constructed. And that's where my father was doing work. And I raced my bike over to this office, hoping that my dad would be there. And who I actually met was Gus Newport, who was the executive director at the time of the Dudley Street Neighborhood Initiative. Now I was 7 years old. I was panicked, had tears in my eyes, was hyperventilating. And Gus, took me in, calmed me down, and really wanted to ask why was I running? Who was I running from? Um, he went out and got me a glass of water and came back. And, my curiosity was like, what are you guys doing? What is this organization? And Gus explained to me that they're there to really help empower the residents to actually revitalize the community, to actually get rid of a lot of these vacant lands and actually put it into productive use. Now, Dudley Street Neighborhood Initiative is a known organization actually throughout the world because of its organizing and planning that it is done in that community. And the way that the governance structure was actually pretty unique. It had a board of directors of 34 seats. And one of the things that was really interesting is that their board also incorporated a youth voice. So youth between the ages of 15 to 17 actually sat on this board of directors. And they actually had a actual voice in the governance. Now, at the time that the organization was actually being started, youth were not a part of the original governance. We actually started to negotiate, and we had an individual like Gus that allowed for that room, allowed for that space to happen. Now, the important thing about Dudley Street Neighborhood Initiative is that it has an affiliate organization, which is the Community Land Trust. And they appoint the majority of those seats onto the Community Land Trust Board. Now, over the years, I started at the age of 7 actually volunteering right after I met Gus. And actually, during that day, Gus asked me, "Hey, would you mind going ahead and actually folding these flyers and stuffing them into envelopes. And later on that day, he actually walked me home. And from that moment on, every day after school, I would pop by the office, say hi to Gus, say hi to the rest of staff, and just started to become a integral part of the movement of having more youth leadership in the organization. Over the years, I played several roles as a volunteer, whether that is to sign folks in to community meetings or to do filmmaking or to be a part of conversations, whether that was with the mayor or whether that was with other consultants. Now, here is actually a small clip of a presentation, and it's actually in the film Holding Ground that talks about the Dudley Street community in the early days. And one of the things that we were doing as youth were we were trying to ask the board of directors for dedicated funds for youth work in the organization.
My name is Jason Webb. I'm 14 years old. I have devoted half of my life to the community.
So a lot of folks that meet me and watch the film, they're like, "Oh yeah, you're the kid in the video that talked about half of his life." And so within Dudley Street, I volunteered for about 10 years in the organization. As a part of that volunteerism, I was a co-founder of the youth committee called Nubian Roots, and the image on the screen here is the youth mural that we actually created. I served at the age of 15 years old on the board of directors. So I was actually one of those youth seats. And at the time, it was pretty controversial because it was like, wait a minute, can this even be allowed by law? And we had some amazing attorneys that, did all the due diligence and made it so that there wasn't going to be any issues. I also served on the board of directors of the Community Land Trust and had the privilege of being its vice president for 2 years. Um, After my stint on the board, I was so much of a troublemaker that they said, hey, let's hire you onto staff. So I was actually on staff for 12 years, served in multiple positions over that period, including the executive director of the Community Land Trust. And here is my son here with me just this past summer as we went and actually toured the mural, as I was showing him a little bit of our legacy in the community. Now, one of the big parts that we did and I did as a staff member was really bring more youth voices and youth programming into the organization. What we created was what was called Communityscapes. And Communityscapes was a youth-run summer jobs program. It was actually youth-run with an 8-person youth team that actually designed and ran the program. This program operated for 5 years. We actually worked with over 200 youth over that time, with the program being effective and employed. So here are just some of the highlights of our 2010 campaign that we did. So for this campaign, we had the privilege of actually hiring 30 youth for the summer. We had multiple work sites that were beautification and also in environmental justice learning for these youth. Now, a lot of these sites were actually community land trust public sites. So whether it was one of our orchards or gardens or even our greenhouse, the youth worked on doing beautification of those spaces. Um, and we also did some fundraising. So we were able to get one of our funders, Citizens Bank, to come in for a significant amount of money so that we could actually hire more youth. Again, Communityscapes was not just about going out and doing the work, it was also about learning. So we actually had the youth members meet as a group every Monday during the summer to discuss concerns and to work ahead as to how are we going to build our community. We also did a number of documentaries that talked about environmental justice and also talked about climate change. And so here are some of the results of just one summer with these 30 youth. They were able to remove 7 tons of trash removed from vacant lots during that summer. 30 hours of environmental education and community history taught during that summer. The collectiveness of worked hours is over 7,000 worked hours. And we were specifically really working with our middle school, where we were able to have these youth work 20 hours there to prep the school and get it ready for the next year. Again, over my years at Dudley Street, I had the privilege of being a part of a lot of their activities, being a part of an amazing staff. One of the accomplishments was having some private conversations with the mayor of Boston and really being with him at a number of events. And him and I used to always talk about strategy. And that's what really transitioned me as I left Dudley Street to come into the National CLT Network, who is the predecessor of Grounded Solutions Network. So, in a lot of my work that I do with helping start up Community Land Trust with a fabulous staff team, I always emphasize this idea of where are the youth? How can we make sure that we actually have more youth at these tables? Because it's not just about what we want, it's also about what they want. In closing, I want to make sure that I give some recognition. This is my mom. I lost her, 7 years ago. She was my rock. I was her rock. Without her love, her support, her ability, and her flexibility of allowing me to do these things that I love to do, I wouldn't be where I am. The other person that I want to shout out is actually Gus Newport. And Gus, we actually lost last year. And Gus was a mentor, he was a friend, he was a father figure. I don't know where my life would be if I did not bump into Gus that day, close to now 40 years ago. So want to make sure that I continue to celebrate his legacy with the work that I'm doing currently right now. So thank you guys for indulging me in my presentation, and I will give it back to Richard.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you so much for sharing those images. You haven't aged a day. Uh, so next on our presentation list will be Carlos Sanchez from South Baltimore CLT. Carlos, the presentation.
Yeah, thank you, Richard. And yeah, just before I didn't have a well-presented presentation like Jason. I have a lot of pictures, but before we get into that, I just want to give a little bit more context of how the South Baltimore Community Land Trust came to be. And ultimately, it started back in a while ago, not remembering the exact day at the moment. But it ultimately started when a group of students, right, attending the local school, which was Benjamin Franklin High School in Curtis Bay, they found out that they were going to build the nation's largest incinerator less than a mile away from their school, right? On top of, for those who may not know, Curtis Bay is already a heavily polluted community where there's over 70 stationary air pollutants, right? So they, ultimately the students worked together, they organized and, ultimately successfully shut down that proposal, right? But the students throughout that fight, they saw different things in the community and they wanted to address all of those, right? They wanted to address the environmental injustice and another issue that they saw, which was the amount of vacants in their homes and the amount of homelessness. And so they wanted to address that as well and kind of attacking the two issues at once. And the question kind of came up with like, how we're going to do this, how we're going to obtain land as students. And so that's kind of where the birth of the South Baltimore Community Land Trust came to be, which is now used as a tool to obtain land and be able to create permanently affordable housing. And using the method of passive homes, where it's like a best way to explain it is like a thermal cup, right? In the winter, it keeps the heat in, and in the summertime, it keeps the cold air in as well. So it's a really good method to reduce the electricity bills and overall maintenance bills. And the good, amazing thing about it is like everything that the land trust does is carefully calculated. The prices and all of that is the positioning of the windows. Everything is laid out in a way where it's going to achieve that and achieve for those homes and families to make less than 50% AMI. And that's kind of the highlights of that. And we actually back in last month, back around a month ago, around September 9th, we had an open house for our first unit, which I'm about to share my screen now so that you can see pictures of that. But it's the first unit home that we were able to finish construction. And the amazing thing about this homes was that these homes, this first property was actually burned down a few years ago on a house fire that for some reason there were one a house started happening, and for some reason the local fire hydrants, the water was shut off, and so that fire ended up spreading across the block. I believe it was like 8 homes that were basically burned down, and we were able to obtain, I believe, four or six of those homes to construct to permanently affordable housing. And so these are some of the images of what that house used to look like. There was everything was burnt down. There was the whole backside of that house was completely gone. And so we were really able to see the condition of the house and really help motivate. That motivated the students. That motivated the staff and the construction to kind of see what this house could become. Where it was like literally what that saying is: one person's trash is another person's treasure. And so we were really able to really think about how we wanted to construct this. And this images is actually another unit across from the school, which was abandoned. And we were able to, we're making it a duplex, which it should be hopefully ready to be sold by the end of the year. That is the aim that we're aiming at. And so these are just how the progress of that house is. It's again, same thing. It's gonna be one of those passive homes designs for the community, which will help filter out the air, all that toxic pollutants and stuff like that. Keep making the house have clean air throughout that community or throughout the residents who will be living there. And so this is just a few more images on how the progress is going. And this is our construction team, really helping us like lay out and have tours and be able to communicate that and stuff like that. And so we actually were able to present the housing, and we were able to show to our city's EJ Commission and other groups as well, showing them the layout, showing them the inside, kind of explaining how everything is going. And these are just a few more images of other groups that we presented to. And this is the construction team with the executive director, Dr. Melanie Thomas, amazing person. And yeah, that's pretty much all the pictures I have, but really able to show that, how all of this started from students, right? And it wasn't like an after school program. It wasn't, a internship. It all literally started with a group of 7, 10, 15 possibly students meeting during school, after school as a group, and kind of seeing what is the issues going on in the communities and how can we address that. And that's, yeah, thank you, Rich, and I'll pass it over back.
Thank you, Carlos. Yeah, I think the story of South Baltimore CLT is a great example for showing that power of youth. Again, this is a CLT that emerged from youth organizing activities. I think it really speaks to that power. For our next presentation, I'm going to turn the mic over to Ashley Allen.
I'm trying to get to the beginning here. All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Ashley Allen, again, Executive Director of the Houston Community Land Trust. And my story starts because a lot of times people ask, well, how did you get into community land trust and how did you get into housing? Especially because my first career, I was a chemist. So this is definitely very different. Many, many years ago, almost 20 years ago, I was a scientist. And so people always ask, well, how did you get into housing? And it starts with my own personal story with housing insecurity. So my family was homeless, doubled up with family members starting in 1992. And then in 1993, we went to our first, moved into our first shelter, the Salvation Army shelter in Charlotte, North Carolina. And I think people don't really understand, we think of homelessness in this very kind of narrow view, and we're thinking about people that we see on the street, and we're thinking about a lot of times people who are experiencing mental illness, and that's kind of the kind of singular image that we have. But this picture of me is in the second shelter we moved into after the Salvation Army shelter. We were transitioned into a women and family shelter where the families had instead of sharing one big room with 100 people, you're sharing a room with just your family. So we moved into this shelter. This picture was taken actually in a shelter, the shelter that we lived in Charlotte, North Carolina, called Plaza Place. And again, in Plaza Place, instead of being in a room with a bunch of people, your family shares one room, and then you have a bathroom just for your family. And so while that seems really tough to be sharing a one room with your entire family, it definitely was an upgrade from the Salvation Army shelter. And on this day, and I remember this very clearly why I took this picture. So during on certain days, people would come in, a lot of churches and community-based organizations would come in and volunteer at the shelter. And so I was talking to one of the volunteers and told them that I played the clarinet. And so they were like, "What? You play the clarinet?" And so then they asked me to come and play the clarinet. And so I took that picture during that visit. But in my mind, I was like, I wonder why they get to go to a house and I don't get to go to a house. It was like, that was really great that y'all came to help us. But what would really great helping us would be to get us a house. And so my very young self at 10 years old here couldn't really understand how some people were housed and some people didn't, because my mom went to work every day, worked a lot. And so it was really trying to understand the systems and stuff. I wasn't there yet. All I knew was that my mom went to work and we still can get a house, and other people go to work and they can have a house. So very simple ideas that, now still are very simple, but I still believe if you go to work and you work hard, you should have a house. But also everybody should have a house, even if you can't go to work every day. It's a basic human right. And I think at that time, it felt like I still didn't really understand how do we get into these situations every day. And so during that time, I was extremely ashamed of being homeless. And so I didn't tell friends. People didn't know. I had friends who I'd known for years and who did not know that my family was unhoused for almost 2 decades on and off. And so some of my family members did not know how serious it was. They knew that we had some challenges. And because we didn't live in the same city as a lot of my other family members, they were not aware of our situation. And so it was really difficult to really want to change something that you weren't even really allowed to say out loud. And so I hid that for years. And then I actually ended up going to college only because I wanted to have a place to live. So I said, okay, well, my family is still, we're still unhoused and I don't want to be unhoused anymore. And I got a scholarship to college. So let me just do that. So that was my answer to how do I find housing? Go to college. And unfortunately, my family was still experiencing housing instability the entire time I was in school. So when it was time for holiday breaks, I didn't know where I was going. I didn't know where my family was staying. I didn't know if they were in a hotel. I didn't know if they were doubled up again. I would never know when it was time to go home for the holidays. So that experience too was still kind of like, I'm still not understanding. Here we are a decade out from the initial experience of being homeless, and I still couldn't figure out how we couldn't get out of this cycle. And it's just like, okay, my mom is still working. Why are we still experiencing these things? And it wasn't until I moved to Chicago, and people talk about the mental illness that happens. We associate mental illness and homelessness, but not understanding that being in that experience and being unhoused for so long can cause mental illness. And so for me, it was a point of healing to try to figure out, okay, I know that there's something here bigger than this. At this point, I'm understanding a little bit more about how systems work. I'm an adult. I know how things work, but I didn't really know how I could fix it. I'm a young person still. When I moved to Chicago, I was 23 years old, so still fairly young. And I didn't really understand how I could make a difference, but I knew I wanted to do something in regards to homelessness and being able to support. So I'm thinking, it wasn't quite, let me go to a soup kitchen or things like that, but how could I go and create a different and create change. And so I Googled organizations and I came across Chicago Coalition for the Homeless. And I was like, okay, well, maybe I can just go volunteer there. I'm not sure exactly what they do, but I'm going to go find out. And so I went down, I sent an email, and at the first email went unanswered. And I sent another email. And so then the coordinator responded back, was like, your email was just, they were like, we were kind of stunned by your email. So we didn't respond because it was like so thoughtful and you wanted to volunteer and give your time. And so I went down and met with them and they were like, you have a story to tell. And I'm like, I don't know how comfortable I feel. I've hidden this for so long. Since I was a little girl, I used to hide the fact that I was homeless. I said, I don't know how I feel about going out and talking about that experience. So they started me out actually as on the Speakers Bureau, talking about my experiences, going into schools and talking to young people. A lot of them who were experiencing the same thing. We were going to schools on the south and west side of Chicago. And a lot of those students were actually experiencing the same thing that I had experienced, but didn't even realize it. They were couch surfing. They were, making a way out of no way and didn't even associate themselves with being homeless or didn't even understand how they even got to that. To them, it was just a way of life. And so going in and talking to young people as a young person still at that time was really one therapeutic for me, but it was opening the eyes to other people who didn't even know that what they were experiencing was unjust. They didn't understand what they were experiencing. There were services and supports, not just the resources, but there was advocacy involved to make change happen so that more people wouldn't experience that same thing. And so as I started doing the Speakers Bureau, then we start talking about community organizing. And I didn't really know what that was. Again, I'm young. Chicago is the home of community organizing. And so I went and they said, you should go and train as an organizer. So I went to these trainings and I learned about the history of organizing and I found my voice. The whole time I was experiencing homelessness from age 9 all the way until 22. I didn't want to tell anybody. Again, I was ashamed. But then them telling me that experience could be used to help others, I said, okay, well, I feel like this might be what I was looking for. This is that thing that I couldn't figure out how I could make change. And so I trained as an organizer, and this is me at a press conference when we were trying to get some policies passed and talking about the actual accountability of the city of Chicago and their efforts for things like Fight for 15 to give people a living wage so they can actually afford housing. I helped with a team to write educational policy to support students that were experiencing homelessness in Chicago public schools. So from a policy standpoint, but also just telling my story, I was able to go and open the eyes and help kind of change some of the systems within the school system, but also in the city of Chicago. And that's where I first learned about community land trust. And so I ended up saying, okay, at that time, my full-time job was actually working with youth. And so I worked with youth for almost 12 years in helping students with student support services, social emotional services, as well as college access. And I wanted to transition out of direct youth work. And so I decided, okay, well, I've been doing housing work kind of on the side and organizing. Let me figure out what I'm going to do next in my next journey. And so that's when I found the Houston Community Land Trust job and came on as executive director in 2018. Actually, yesterday made 6 years for me in Houston. And I moved here for this job. So 6 years in and started operations in January of 2019. And so in that time, we have now 200 homeowners in our community land trust. And we have, I think, what I would consider true affordable housing. And our homeowners are paying less than half of what the average mortgage would be for a home in Houston. So we are actually looking at true affordability, not just saying it, but actually doing it. And that's so, that is definitely due to using the CLT model and then not just getting people in homes, but keeping them by actually utilizing the stewardship piece of the Community Land Trust. Last year, we became 2 years ago, we became a membership organization. So again, we have the housing program, great to get people into homes, but how again do you keep the community voice involved? How do you support your homeowners and your renters and anybody else in the Community Land Trust after they have gotten into a Community Land Trust property? And so that takes a bunch of people, and here's some of them at our annual membership meeting. And Jason mentioned Gus Newport. We actually initiated a scholarship in his name and Dr. Newport and Charles Sherrod, one of the founding members of the New Communities CLT in Albany, Georgia. And because those two men were so influential in the Community Land Trust model expanding, and Gus definitely was at our second conference, and really just provided some long-term insight. So again, this is part of the model. It's helping people not just get in a home, but building community. And part of that is helping them achieve their educational goals. So I just wanted to mention that because of Jason's very touching comments about Gus Newport. And so in addition to that, so we have single family home ownership, but we knew that there needed to be more than just building regular homes on single family lots. But that's what the city wanted. But we knew, talking to community, that more needed to happen. And so we partnered with Rice University and Prairie View A&M University and the city's planning department. And we started on these projects to figure out how we were going to develop housing that could address the housing shortage, housing typologies that were missing in the community, and really build housing that focused on the community aesthetic. Unfortunately, new bills are not thinking about what the community wants, what the community needs, and how the community looks. And so that was the goal for this particular project. And so we worked with the school, students at Rice University's architecture school and students at Prairie View A&M's architecture school to design homes for historic communities that were experiencing gentrification, and getting them to bring in the new ideas. Because of course, developers, they're there to make money. They're there to build whatever makes them the most money, and not really thinking about, okay, how do we center our own experiences, but also what we know about community? And so we took the students out to the actual communities that we were designing for, to get them to see the aesthetic and say, hey, this is what these for-profit developers are building. We challenge you to be more thoughtful in your designs and be community focused, and think about, as young people, as you go into your field, how are you going to bring that voice and bring the voice of the community in your work? And they were challenged to do so, and they did a fantastic job. In particular, one student, Miss Autumn Rose, who you will get ready to hear from. Autumn is, as you can see all of her credentials here, I can't even go through all of them, but she did a design that we are actually in the process of getting ready to develop. They're going to be 1-bedroom, 1-bath bungalows that will be in the 3rd Ward community, a community that is being ripped by gentrification here in Houston, Texas, and people are being displaced very rapidly. And so the way she described her design and the thoughtfulness, again, centering community, and again, a young person being able to come in and not be driven by just profit, but driven by the actual task at hand that centers community. She did a phenomenal job. And so I just wanted to highlight, this is what it means to engage youth, and then thinking about them, because they're going to be adults. They're not going to be youth forever. So how do we make sure that youth are transitioning in and they're centering community in whatever they do, whether it be architecture, whether it be nursing, whether it be education? How do you center those you are serving? And I think she did a phenomenal job in doing so. And so these designs will actually be groundbreaking in 2025 and be on the ground, ready for people to move in from the 3rd Ward community at the end of next year. And I'm going to pass it on to Miss Autumn Rose to talk about her design and kind of her method for engaging community as a young person.
All right, thank you so much, Ashley, for introducing me. So let me share my screen. So again, my name is Autumn Rose. I am an architecture and construction science junior at Prairie View A&M University. So first I want to start off with, I guess, a little bit about my background. So I got into the architecture and construction field or area because my mom is a real estate agent and she's now a real estate broker. So I've been around in Houston, based off in Houston, I've been around every type of home you could see, every type of commercial building you could see, land, everything according to real estate I have been in my entire life. So my reason for wanting to go into architecture is because I love looking at houses. I said, you know what, one day I want to design my own house. And it's amazing seeing that something that I have designed is actually being built in real life. So like I said, my mom has always been in real estate. I'm 20 years old, so I've seen how much Houston has developed from a young child living in A-Leaf or living in, a not so great community to now I'm 20 years old, seeing how fast Houston has grown, and especially in the 3rd Ward area. My mom went to TSU, Texas Southern University, and she cannot believe how her community was, like Ashley said, literally ripped apart. So my reason for going into this is to give the community back what they deserve. The gentrification of this community is honestly sad. As we were walking through, you would see a home that has so much charm, that has, you know, charm similar to the buildings that I created, and next to a cookie cutter home that is boxy and has stucco, and you know, things like that really plays a part into why I chose to do this design. In my studio, we were given two tasks to do. We were either given to do this project with the Houston Community Land Trust to do affordable housing, or we have a situation going on at my university where gentrification is happening. At my university, Prairie A&M University in Prairie, Texas, is facing a similar crisis as to what Third Ward is facing. So the actual city of Prairie doesn't own not even an acre of the land. Our land is owned by Texas A&M University, and they had, you know, representatives come out and say, hey, this is what we want to do to Prairie View, Texas, because they own a good amount of our land. And the way that they want to design Prairie View is not to the history. It's taking all of our history and just throwing it in the trash. So I was given a choice to either work on affordable housing or trying to get back Prairie View. And of course, I chose affordable housing because I love houses, and this is something that I've actually seen happen. So now we can get into my project. So I decided to base my project off the Holman Complex. I call it the Holman Complex. It is 2109 Holman Street in Houston, Texas. Okay, sorry. So a way that I approached this was I first started off with a SWOT analysis. So seeing what is the strength, what is the weakness, the opportunities, and the threats of this community. So this community or this area is about a block away from the project row houses. It's in a great area. It's right, as you can see in this little area right there, that is downtown, and the site is right here. So it's very close proximity to downtown. So it's a booming area. You have Houston, or the University of Houston is about a 10-minute walk. TSU, Texas State University, is about a 10-minute walk. The Emancipation Park is about a block away from this area. And of course, the Project Row Houses is a block away from this area. So this is a very unique area that has so much charm, and that's why I chose this specific spot. So a strength, like I said, it is right across from downtown. So you have Highway 59 or Highway 69, which improves transportation access for residents, while the Emancipation Park amenities enhance the quality of life. A strength is gentrification awareness can spur community engagement and efforts to preserve affordable housing and nearby public transit options. A weakness is because this area is a booming area and it is a perfect area to develop, it raises gentrification and property values and living costs. So it increases the risk of displacement for low income residents. Like I said, you can take a walk down there, you will see homes that have so much charm that I guess are considered not the quality of homes that developers want nowadays, next to homes that have nothing to do with the actual culture of Houston or the culture of the people that develop this community. So the gentrification that is happening, it is sad and it is very fast. The opportunity of this area is exploring the inclusionary zoning and partnering with local groups and agencies can create mixed income housing. So that is the goal of this area. And then a threat is, again, gentrification attracts wealthier residents and investors, intensifying competition. So, like I said, I've been able to see how fast and how vast Houston has been, and being able to see homes that have so much charm, and not even just Third Ward, areas all over Houston, just being, families have been displaced. I've seen my mom have a lot of clients who can no longer afford where they live. Their family has been living there for decades and decades. My family in Louisiana or in Lake Charles could no longer, my grandfather or my great-grandfather built up the land, built up the property, and after he passed, my family could no longer afford it, so they had to sell it, and it became a sewer plant. So this is near and dear to me. This is stuff that I see. This is why, as you will see in my designs, I really put my heart and my time into this, because this is what I come from. So in this area, you will see that the housing income, or the household income, is a low income housing. You will see the unemployment rate is very high. It's a very high unemployment rate. The majority race of this area is Black, and the educational achievement or bachelor's degree is somewhat educated, meaning some of them may not have been to college, some of them may not have even graduated or have a GED. And the homeowners versus renters mean that this area mostly has renters, or renters are occupying this space. So here's my first design. It is called the Magnolia Belle Chateau. Here are the first units, the A and B units. So I chose the case study of the City of Houston ADU, their starting box plan. So I can go a little more into why I chose the starting blocks. So I chose this because it is compactful, yet this design offers a practical starting point for homeowners in Houston with limited property space to explore the potential of an ADU. So beginning with the desirable floor plan, this allows easier realization of opportunities compared to larger plans that have or may face difficulties. So I decided to name it the Magnolia Belle Chateau. As you can see in the bottom, you could see the elevation. I wanted to give kind of a Southern Belle type of charm to it, or I guess you can say a Louisiana or New Orleans type of charm. I noticed in Louisiana, you can go down there, all of their homes have a certain aesthetic. You can't tell the difference between $1 million home or I guess an affordable home or a lower income house, because they all have that charm. They have the aesthetic that they love their area, if that makes sense. So that's what I wanted to do for this home. So in the first unit, you see it's a unit A. So it has one bedroom, it has a large covered porch, it has 2 entryways. And again, like I said, I took inspiration from the New Orleans style homes. So they normally have 2 entrances or 2 exits in the front of the house. So you have a way to get in through your bedroom and you have a way to get in through your living room. So that's why I incorporated this. And like I said, it is near 2 universities, Texas Southern University and University of Houston. When I was thinking through this, I was thinking either, this can either be for elderly or college students like myself who are graduating soon and who need an affordable house, in their area where they are from. So if we were to turn this into an area for students, it can be, or you can look into my other plan. I'll get more into that. So you have a stacked washer and dryer, you have an open kitchen and a living room area, 2 sets of double French doors, and this plan is not even 500 square feet. It's about the size of 2 garages. It is 469 square feet, and the courtyard is about 145 square feet. So you're able to sit out and enjoy your community in this space. And then the one to the left, the unit B, it is pretty much the same plan. It just has 2 balconies. So you have 3 exits, 3 entrances, 3 exits, and you're able to, enjoy the front and the back of your home. And when I get more into the actual how I incorporated the cluster of these homes, you'll be able to see why I incorporated 2 patios and 2 balconies. And like I said, here's the front elevation. It has a New Orleans style. It has I wouldn't even say a New Orleans style. It just has like a Southern Belle charm. And that's why I wanted to name it this, because although it is for an affordable home, it doesn't mean it has to, I wouldn't say look affordable, but it looks like it belongs in the community, especially when you look at the project row houses. And that's what I tried to keep the aesthetic as, the homes that were already there. And here is the unit C and D. So these are 2 bedrooms. So like I said, it's for the 2 bedrooms, it's about 3 garages. So these are very small, but these are I try to maximize the way I design these homes in the best way possible. So with these, you have 3 entrances. So again, say you're a college student and you're renting the home or buying the home with your friend, you each have your own living quarters. So you could enter through here, have your own area. You don't even have to come to the common room until you want to. Yeah, so that's why I designed the 2 bedrooms. And for this one, again, it's the same. It has the balcony as well. So you have the balcony in the front and you have the balcony in the back, and it's 2 bedrooms. And at the bottom, you see a bit of an elevation, what it'll look like in the community. So you could easily have like the two, at the bottom, you see the 2 patios. So say you're going off of Holman, which I'll show you in the actual site plan. You're riding off of Holman or San Emmanuel and you have the entrance to the front. You could park in the front and engage with your community in the back and vice versa. Here is another alternative that I decided to do. It's called the remote retreat. This one, I really engaged it towards business owners. And I forgot to mention one thing in the other plans. As you can see, they are built on pier and beams. I know in Houston, it'll say the areas that we live in are 500-year flood zone, but we know if it rains more than 20 minutes, you can't leave your property. It's flooded. You know, you start panicking because like, okay, what am I going to do? We're going to have a Harvey 2.0. So that's why I decided to put it on pier and beams, because if you look in Houston, unfortunately, we are not building on pier and beams. We're not looking towards the future of, although it is not in a flood zone, the way we are developing and how fast we're developing, it can easily become a flood zone in a year. So that's why I decided to look towards the future and say, okay, it may not be a flood zone now, but it will be later. And that's why I decided to use the second one as having the living quarters at the top. So at the bottom, like I said, say you're a college student or you're somebody who has a business, you could park your car at the bottom and then you could have like your own office space, or say I decided to have like somebody that does hair, so they can have their hair station right here and then they have a bathroom. And then to get up top to the living quarters, you just go out the side through the garage and then walk straight up. And in this one, you have a patio in the back and you have a patio in the front. Again, my reason for having 2 patios is so you are able to engage with your community. And like I said, you'll be able to see that in the second or in the next slide. So in this one, you'll walk through the patio and then you'll have your living room and you have your kitchen and then you have your bedroom, your bathroom, your storage. The top plan of this is not even 600 feet. It's about 529 feet. Again, about 200, not 200, 2 garages. So these are very small plans, yet have so much charm and I try to maximize the space as much as I can, especially with how small we needed to do these affordable houses. So here is my site plan. Now you can understand why I decided to do 2 balconies on each. So for this one, for example, this is the Malibu Chateau Belle Unit D. So it has the patio in the front, patio in the back. So say you're coming off San Emmanuel Street and then you want to go into your house, you can either park on the side and walk straight through to your house, or you could come through the back, come through like this little alleyway, park right here, take one of these sidewalks and walk straight into your house, which is why, again, I wanted to have 2 patios in the front and in the back. That way you can engage with your community and see what's going on in your community. So this person could talk to this person, could talk to this person. And I also had it in a way where you can add 3 more units. So you could have, you know, the Malibu or the Magnolia Belle Chateau here. You could play around with this as much as you want to, because it's enough space to add at least 3 more properties. So like I said, you could park here, come through, engage with your community, walk to your home, or, and I know for the areas that are not community centered or where most people are going to be walking through, you have the opportunity to not have a patio that way. So you can just come through your front patio. And then once, you leave your house, you jump in your car and you walk or you drive straight through to Holman Street. And at the bottom, you have the two remote retreats. So you can come straight off Holman Street and then just drive straight into your driveway and then just drive straight into your garage. So that is why I designed this the way I wanted it to. I wanted a cluster community where you can engage with your community. This square footage is not even, it's about 150 on all sides. So this is I wouldn't say it's a small community, but it's enough to where you could engage with the community and have so many affordable lots in 2 bedrooms, 1 bedroom spaces, office space areas in a small lot where if this was a cookie cutter home or one of the homes that they're trying to build in the area, they would only have like 2 to 3 homes on this lot. So yes, thank you so much. I hope y'all understood my thought process and why I decided to do everything that I decided to do. Yeah, thank y'all so much.
Thank you so much, Autumn, for that amazing work. My congratulations, not just to you, but to all the other students at Prairie View that have worked with Houston CLT. And I think it's just another great example of the potential for engaging youth in community land trust practice. So we're at 12:57. We have about 18 minutes, 17 minutes of time left in the webinar. I'd remind the audience that if you have a question for our panelists, to please leave them in the Q&A box. We have one question there currently, but I'd like to ask a question for discussion for the panelists. And I think here specifically for the folks who are working in a community land trust, that I think would be useful for the audience is to hear you folks reflect on challenges that you've encountered when doing this work, right? Your community development, your housing organizations, partnerships are often key to CLT practice. And so I wonder, in engaging with youth, for our audience, what are those challenges that you've encountered that come with engaging with this group? And anyone could whoever wants to take this first can go ahead.
Well, I mean, I can start, and I know Carlos and Autumn are doing this right now, but from my history and my experience over the years, one of the biggest challenges that I know that I've seen through my work is technology. That, back when I was growing up, we didn't have a lot of technology. We didn't have a lot of outlets for us to do things. So we would just play outside, and it would be easier to be able to grab our attention and bring us into a place where we felt like that there was at least the structure and the space that was welcoming to us. Nowadays, from my experience, I see a lot of youth, and I even have this with my own children, that are just, sucked into the technology, into the gaming systems, into those things, that a lot of times thinking about those outside forces, they don't want to even think about, or that they don't even interact with a lot, to understand that they have to play, even at this age, a very important role in what that looks like into the future. So for me, one of the things that I continue to see as a challenge is the advancement of technology. My kids now are asking for virtual reality stuff for Christmas. And it's like, oh man, how much more out of touch are we going to be as a society by continuing to have a lot of this technology take over? So that those are one of the challenges that I've seen and that I continue to say to, groups, whether it's the Houston CLT or whether it's even the South Baltimore CLT, how can you continue to make sure that there is at least the space in the ecosystem that when youth do want to enter, that they don't feel like that they're awkward or that it's not welcoming.
Thank you for that, Jason. Yeah, Carlos, I wonder if you could speak to this a bit, considering how deeply engaged South Baltimore CLT is with a local high school, Ben Franklin High School in South Baltimore. And, maybe thinking about what Jason just said about technology and the distractions that exist, what pops up for you as a youth organizer for the CLT?
Yeah, yeah, of course. And I do agree with what a lot of Jason was saying. There is, technology advancements, progressing rapidly. But I will say that another challenge that and that I've seen that we experience is that the amount of funding, right? And I say it in the sense that a lot of youth, especially in the South Baltimore area, have families to maintain, have they're for whatever reason, they have to provide that additional income for their families. And so, what we really try to encourage is like, have that funding ability to, pay them for the work that they do so that they could help their families out. And, there isn't that much funding available or to be able to have youth involved. But those who do get involved, it's a lot of it has been like a lot of trial and error learning, and because this amount of work isn't, it's not a lot of people will participate in, but once you do get those group of students that do participate, you see them coming on next year or during the summer, coming and going, and even some of them taking the taking it upon themselves to do it. A great example of that was, a group of students that we worked with. Shout out to them, Tarek and Tasia. They enjoyed the work to the point where they started making their own business to help support their pay and help progress this movement further. It's ultimately being able to find those youth who want to participate and be able, again, trial and error, being able to see who how we can support them in their lives as well. Some of them require funding for their, or additional income for their families. Others require more hands-on activity or being able to connect with them in a more personal level, so that they get that enjoyment. They get they feel connected to the work that they're doing.
Ashley, would you like to?
So you froze for a second there, but I thought you said my name, but I couldn't hear. Yeah, just getting young people to see the connection and see the bigger picture. I think is going to the whole technology thing. You're so focused on what's right there in front of you in this false world of whatever you see online or what technology is providing you. But there's a much bigger world out there, and I don't think people even understand some of these issues that they may be experiencing, or what's really going on in the real world isn't the flashy, glamorous things we see on Instagram. There's a real world out there with real world problems, and the problems that are in your community. As I'm learning and being part of, the International Center for CLTs is learning that these problems are global. And we know that there's problems across the world, but just seeing even some of like the anti-Blackness and the displacement and the gentrification, these things are global. And so getting young people to understand that the small bubble that they're in, just as adults have to do and are currently, and that's something that I'm doing is learning that it's bigger than just what's happening in your neighborhood or within your sphere. A lot of these issues are widespread and global, and we have to figure out ways to do something about them on a systemic level so it can ripple across, continents and different countries.
Thank you for that, Ashley. So we have a number of questions are now rolling into the Q&A box. So I think instead of bringing up my boring questions, we'll take the questions from the audience. And our first question comes from Ricardo. This is more of a question maybe for Ashley and Jason. But Ricardo asked, one common question regarding youth and CLTs is the possibility to inherit the properties. Is that a concern in your communities, and how does that work in the different CLTs you participate?
Mm-hmm. I do think that is a major issue that comes up in our conversations because, we use the term a lot. They throw out the term like generational wealth. I think a lot of people don't even understand what that means. They think of it as just being able to have a lot of money, passing it down to your next your heirs. But it's really about preserving your family's history, your community. It's about being stable. It's about not being scared of not being having a roof over your head. As Autumn mentioned about her family in Lake Charles having to sell their property, that's not generational wealth just by owning land if you can't afford to keep it, if you can't develop on it, if it isn't actually bringing you in money, if it isn't part of the community that you live in, that you grew up in and have a connection to. That generational wealth also means generational stability and generational connection. So it is a big part of what we're doing at the Houston CLT. And I think the CLT model in general is being able to stabilize that property, whether it be a rental or a commercial space or single family housing, is to stabilize it so it's there for the next generation, whether that be just your immediate heirs or the next generation of that community. And so I think the CLT model in general addresses the issue of being able to go back. I'm going to be honest, the few places that we did live in Charlotte, my sister just made this comment not too long ago, they don't exist. Everything's been bulldozed. Everything's gone. So I don't have even if I had a community to go back, even if I had a place to live in those years, in my formative years, that's not there anymore. I don't have a neighborhood to go back to because gentrification has happened and displacement has happened in Charlotte so rapidly. So that generational part is not there because I can't move on. There's nothing for me to pass on. There's not a community to attach the next generation to, my heirs to. So I think that's the whole point of the CLT. And we're really focusing, particularly in Third Ward, about how do you keep those generations and those people who grew up in Third Ward in that community and be able to have a place to go back to that they recognize and that they have a connection to. That's that generational part of the wealth. How do you make sure the generations are able to access it, sustain it, and feel a part of it?
Yeah, and ditto to everything that Ashley said. The only thing that I would add is, as a part of the pre-stewardship that community land trusts do as they go through that legal document, which is the ground lease helps to facilitate that, but has to also make sure that folks understand that they have to do proper estate planning.
Mm-hmm.
So then their assets are not tied up in probate court and tied up in the bureaucracy that is our court systems, but can easily be able to move. So that is a fundamental piece that all CLTs should be doing, is on the pre-side, even before they buy the home, talk about, who are your heirs? Who would you
Mm-hmm.
like to put in and write into the ground lease that they would be able to receive this property? And then after they get in the home, it is about thinking through what is the proper estate planning. And as what Ashley and the Houston CLT folks did is also one step further by putting some legal documents at the closing table to help facilitate that asset to move when those folks do move on at the closing table. So those are things that I feel like is an important part of that generational piece, is that asset is able to go, and all CLTs should be doing that.
And quickly, shout out to Candace and Desmond, our stewardship team, who put our transfer on death deed program in place. And I think we're at like 60 or 70% of our homeowners have done their transfer on death deed. So their homes will avoid probate court. Thank you, Jason, for bringing that up. I would be remiss not to give a shout out to the stewardship team at the CLT, Houston CLT, for that.
Jason and Ashley, folks, just to be aware of time, I asked that folks who are interested with connecting with our panelists, and many of you have done this already, please leave your contact information in the chat so we can connect you with our participants. I'm going to ask one last question. This is a question that combines a few questions that we have in the Q&A box. And I want to direct this to Autumn and Carlos. And Autumn, I'd like for you to start first. Speak about your experience. What made the spark happen for you in this project working with Houston CLT? And if you both could just speak briefly about, what are the things that you find are speaking to young people's interests, right? You're on there on the ground, you're seeing it. What are folks responding to? So Autumn, if you could answer first and speak a little bit about that experience and what motivated you, what did you learn from this?
I think my main spark was being able to kind of relate to the people, because like I said, my family was in a similar situation where they could no longer afford their home that they built on their land. So being able to relate to something like that, or being able to relate to these people who can no longer afford their land. And then, like I said, I literally have seen Houston has grown so much and so fast and become so unaffordable, even for a student like me. So that's why when I created these projects, not only just because of the close proximity to the universities, I kind of related in a way to imagine you're a college student and you want to live off campus, or you want to live in closer proximity to downtown, or, things like that. And I think relating that to people that are in my situation now helps a lot. So if we could somehow relate that, hey, when you leave out of college, 9 times out of 10, you're not going to be able to afford the fancy home that your parents live in, or you're not going to be able to afford the dream home that you want. You're going to have to work a lot harder to afford those things. So I think if we could somehow have that related to people my age or to students, saying how, hey, you may be one of these ones that, has to get affordable housing or has to be in these programs, I think that'll help a lot.
Carlos?
Yeah. And really well said, I do think of finding a way to, what started my that spark for me was, seeing how something what I contribute to can become something bigger. And shout out to my amazing mentors, Dr. Mandy Thomas, Greg, and Shoshanda. They really helped me see that my contributions, however small they were, led to something greater. And that is something I think like a lot of young people, if we're able to help them see, you don't have to be a certified whatever to be participating in this kind of work. My encouragement is, participate, the CLT closest to you, find a nonprofit that or group that you want to volunteer with, if that's how it starts, and kind of seeing how what you're good at, what you can contribute could be part of that bigger goal. That is something that I think really speaks to a lot of youth. However the contribution they can. This kind of work is you can whatever thing you're good at, art, speaking, science, development, everything plays a role. And that making sure that students are able to see that, right? That being part of something bigger and fighting for their communities, fighting for what if for example, my family is going through the same thing about not affordable housing and stuff like that, and being able to connect with them in that personal level allows them to draw closer and feel that connection. So, yeah.
I just Autumn and Carlos beautifully put, and I think there's a really great lesson there, and it is youth are looking for something to believe in, to be engaged by, and I think it's obvious that not just as organizations that secure tenure and affordable housing, but thinking about CLTs as mechanisms for enabling all members of a community to participate and to find meaning. And I think you all have really done a really great job of illustrating that picture for us. We are at time. I want to thank all of the participants for joining us here today. For our audience, bear with me, folks. Just a reminder that a short exit survey will pop up after the webinar. Please fill these out. As a thanks, we'll send you a link to download a free PDF version of our latest publication, Reweaving the Tapestry of Tenure. And before I go, just want to promote the latest publication from the center in partnership with the Lincoln Institute of Land Policy, authored by John Davis and Kristen King-Reese, Preserving Affordable Home Ownership, Municipal Partnerships with Community Land Trusts. This is an amazing resource for community land trust practitioners in the United States who need help, advice, assistance with how to talk to municipal partners, how to cover all these key areas of CLT operation and practice. It's available now for download. I just want to, once again, thank our audience. I want to thank our participants. And I hope that we can continue this conversation on, I think, what is an essential topic. And wherever you might be around the world, on behalf of the International Center for CLTs, have a wonderful day and onward.